My friend, welcome to the live stream. If you're watching the replay, you can check the timestamps down below. We are doing a shadow work psychology Q&A extravaganza. If you've never seen me before, these are the books that I've read, and what I try and do in these live streams is share the books that I've read, including the books that are over here, off camera. Oh, that entire shelf. That bookshelf's called Bernard. Bernard the bookshelf. He also has books for us to learn about, and today I will be responding to the community and the first come, first served basis, more or less, of various shadow work questions. You can check timestamps down below, as I just said. Skip through the necessary 3 to 5 minutes of waffle at the beginning of a live stream, and we will get right into things once I've readjusted the setup back to where it needs to be, so that we've got Mr. Decimus Meridius over there, guiding us through with a good warrior archetype. Welcome if you're joining live. Say hello in the chat. Let's get some conversation going. You and me, where are you tuning in from? Where are you in the world? What kind of time of day is it? And what kind of weather do you have emotionally? In fact, that's the best question. What is the weather that you're feeling today emotionally? Am I a qualified psychotherapist? No, I am not. I am a man who encourages you to do your own study and become your own self-therapist of choice. I've never claimed to be a psychotherapist. I'm a life coach who reads a lot of psychology books and shares things for free on YouTube, just like in this moment. So if you want good psychology books, this is the place that we hang out. If you want clinical, professional support, then please do go elsewhere. And also, even if you were interacting with a therapist on YouTube, just know that there's only so much that can be done through a live stream. So if you're joining live, my question for you is, what is your internal weather today? Emma's already here and says that she has gloomy internal weather. The more creative and more poetic, the better. My internal weather is something like, I just got back from a fire, so I've got a fire pit in my garden. I finished the Shadow Work Library first seminar, the EU seminar, that was nearly 2 hours long, and to recover my eyes from the bright lights, so quite literally glowing on my face, I've got this one, then I've got a light up here, and then I've got this candle. I went outside and lit a fire, and my inner world feels like a nice kind of partially scorched forest, but it's regenerative destruction. So I feel partially scorched, but still very alive, and I feel like I'm going through a necessary burning. So I feel like a controlled forest fire of sorts. That's my internal world. Let me know about yours in the chat. Again, we have Emma saying that she's got gloomy internal weather. Anyone else have any other particular weathers as I get the live stream up on the online streaming phone? And then we'll go straight into the questions. Mike, good to see you here. I can see a question coming up on the screen already. Welcome everyone who's joining live. Just bringing up the stream. There we go. Anton says, hey Jordan, isn't inner father telling you that it's time to go to bed? Not at all, my friend. It is 10:30 at night. Yesterday I went to bed at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm currently shifting my sleep schedule. It's very unusual that I'd go to bed at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but I am mostly nocturnal at this point. My inner father is so much of a fatherly figure that I actually honour my own personal dreams, ambitions, and goals and intentions to be, at this stage in my business and my personal well-being, anchored to Californian time, which is 8 hours behind UK time. So generally speaking, it would be very normal for me to want to go to bed anywhere between 5 a.m. and 10 a.m. these days, because if you imagine I would be in California, 10 a.m. London time would be 2 a.m. Californian time. A little bit earlier would be a little bit healthier, but right now I have a majorly international client base and international students in the Shadow Work Library seminar. For example, I'm hosting a seminar with anywhere between 15 to 20 people tonight at midnight UK time, and I very much am a night owl through and through. My energy is high. I enjoy the creativity of the evening. I enjoy the soulful nature of being alone with yourself, and also, internationally speaking, I do have clients around the world, so it's good for me to be up nice and late, Anton, and I think my inner father actually feels quite supportive of, like, you do what you need to do, son, I understand, and not a punishing father figure that has an artificial bedtime. But then maybe the example is a trauma story in itself. We will find out. It's not something to be sustained as well. I'm not recommending that people do this. This is just my personal life based on my personal control of my own business and my own lifestyle. I know it's not normal, but it is what works for me. We are seeing in the chat, Avi's here. I'm creative with words and concepts. Thank you very much. Hetty, you are here. Hello to you. I also see Hikam and Magd and Abby. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hey Cam, you said, can I give us a roadmap to shadow work, please? Yes, I can. This question was asked last time round in the live stream. I'll give the exact same answer that I gave there. If you're on a laptop or a computer, please open up a new tab, go onto YouTube and type in Jordan Thornton Shadow Work playlist. That is a 5 to 6 hour mini course on shadow work that is the first beginner step that I made completely for free for YouTube. It takes some of the essential lessons from the shadow work library, packages them into an accessible, deep dive, binge-worthy session, and that is what I want you to go for. So, Shadow Work Playlist by Jordan Thornton. It is a 5-hour response to this particular question. Rather than me giving a few minutes in the live stream, you will not be disappointed. Here, Cam, you say, okay, thank you, Jordan. Yeah, that's where you need to go. So just open it in another tab. When the live stream's finished, you can go in onto that one. We're going to do a live stream for about 40 minutes or so, maybe 50 minutes, because I do have a seminar starting in an hour and 20 minutes. We will go into the questions. We have got Spiritual Warrior joining us. Good to see you, Spiritual Warrior. How are you doing today? Any questions on your mind? Likewise, if anyone is joining live, the rules of this live stream is please put the word question followed by your statement in good, full English that's easily comprehensible. Complexity is fine, but I need to know what you're talking about, so please make sure to reread things and be like, does this make sense? Does this make sense for other people, not just myself? And then I'll really be able to go deeper into it. Spiritual Warrior said, how do I deal with spiritual attacks? I will deal with your question first, and then I'll be going into Mike Thompson's question. So, how to deal with spiritual attacks. I'm not the specialist in this, I'm not an exorcist, but what I would focus on is fundamentally controlling what's within your control. So if you're someone who's noticing that you're going into potentially forced flashbacks or spiritual flashbacks or visionary states that are outside of your control, what I would focus on is anchoring in your body no matter what. So whether or not you work with a professional, which is highly advised if things are getting dangerous, you should at the very least do everything you can to bring the energy, metaphorically speaking, from up here and out there down into the body. Classical advice would be like eating heavy foods, doing heavy walks, doing heavy training, being in states of heaviness, literally bringing the energy down into the flesh. Physical work is also good. Massage, self-massage, self-touch, coming back down into this being, this body. That helps with spiritual attacks at the base level of safety. If you're looking for a more comprehensive answer of how to deal with the various entities and possessions and things that you're looking into, you are then in the world of paranormal psychology. You could look down the exorcism pathway, you could go deep into the New Age psychology and understand that all thought forms and all astral appearances are fundamentally reinterpretations of something that's an internal experience, or you go on the opposite pathway, which is these are very much definite creatures and beings that we're encountering from otherworldly realms, in which case you might have to go to a different YouTuber who specializes in those kinds of things. I would focus more on the psychological story of what to go for if you are naturally a little bit dissociated, a little bit overwhelmed with what you're seeing. Just bring yourself back to center, read up on the transpersonal psychology literature. You'll probably specifically enjoy everything around entities and theosophy overall as well. But that's what I will give. I see Ashley's question. You came up on the screen, very quick question. You said, have I ever tried EFT, emotional freedom techniques? What books do I like on it? I'm just learning about it, the tapping. I haven't read any books on it in particular. I'm familiar with the technique, and I even recommended to one of my current clients this week a emotionally freedom tapping technique based on a certain process they're going through. Of course, I'll protect their confidentiality, so I'm not going to say what they're going through as an individual, but one of my clients was going through a process where they needed basically a tapping response, and the particular tapping response they needed was a relaxing of their gaze because they were locked into something that was happening in their nervous system. So I advised that they combine tapping, specifically the tapping on the side of the temple, with a wide peripheral gaze. This is generally a good relaxant. So imagine wide peripheral gaze. You can do it right now as you're listening to me. Stop looking at the screen, whatever screen you've got. Expand the horizon. So I'm now seeing the bookshelf, I'm seeing the side of my desk, kind of like a steady focus. Works much better when you're looking out a window or outside, and this is like a gentle tap. You can, and it does stuff already. I already start to lose focus and attention, but there's certain tap points there on the temple. You can see that I pushed maybe a bit too hard. I've already got the red coming up, or maybe the fact that there's actually something going on there. The heat is coming up immediately. Look at that, it comes up on camera. Even just a little bit of tapping. Relaxing. It's because I've been focused in. on looking through the screens, that has a variety of bioenergetic effects, a variety of healing effects. So I do recommend tapping if you resonate with the modality. I don't have any books to recommend for you in particular, but it's a good modality. It's a form of bioenergetic somatic therapy and a bit of energy medicine in there as well. Going back to Mike's question, Mike says, howdy. Howdy, Mike. Jordan, your suggestion 2 weeks ago on Karen Horney's neurosis and human growth was awesome. I'm on chapter 2 and the lessons keep on coming. What a fantastic choice. So Mike was here 2 weeks ago when I recommended this book, which you'll have to screenshot and turn around in your photo gallery. Neurosis and Human Growth by Karen Horney. I believe this one was probably written in the 1930s, if not the 1940s, one of Freud's original disciples. And this book, Mike, I mean, if you're still in the chat, tell me what you got from the book in particular, and you will sell it on my behalf. Again, there's no affiliate link. I've never used an affiliate link once in my channel. Imagine that. Over 300 videos recommending hundreds and hundreds of books, never once used an affiliate link. I don't need any money from you from buying a book. I want you to just read Karen Horney for the sake of this incredible pioneering female thinker. She was fucking fantastic, and Mike's been enjoying her himself. We've got a question from Ruby. Ruby's talking about romantic delusions and if women are delulu. That's an interesting question. We'll get to that one. I'm going to go back up on the stream and see who asked questions first though, Ruby, if that's okay. Jennifer tells me that she has been bathing in the flow of her majestic river, feeling divine, observing the play of the crow and the adolescent eagle. It's actually life or death flow, play, but what a beautiful thing to be. That is incredible internal weather to experience. That's an internal myth, as it were. You've got an entire narrative going on, very rich in a world by the sounds of it, so I'm happy to hear. We also have some questions from Techie. Techie says, question, how to work with functional freeze? What to do if one is getting into the state of dorsal vagal shutdown when out around people, activated by not feeling safe? What I would first recommend you do is you de-therapeuticize your language. And I mean that in a genuine sense. When people start talking in the language of I have dorsal vagal this or I have certain shutdown responses and they start coding it in the technical terms, it can sometimes be the case that at an unconscious level they are treating themselves like a bit of a science experiment. This might not be the case for you in particular, but it's a necessary thing that I want to emphasize. When you start learning about things like polyvagal theory or nervous system responses overall, it is very exciting and very clarifying to learn the literal terms. But at a certain stage, when you start labeling things as, this is a functional freeze, and Techie, who asked the question, just said, what should I do if I'm in a state of dorsal vagal shutdown? I'd reframe it. I'd choose different language to begin with, because then you're going to be more likely to find a body-based, body-first solution rather than a mind-going down solution. So how to deal with dorsal vagal shutdown is one way of phrasing it. How to deal with feeling blank. How to deal with feeling like I'm blank. How to deal with feeling like I'm in a state of blank. Or, more accurately, rather than just an emotion, how to deal with the specific feeling of something in my something, tightness in my chest, knots in my stomach, heaviness in my heart, weight on my brow, coldness in my hands, fear along my back. This is so much more useful for you finding your personal roadmap out of a shutdown or freeze response. To say, oh, I'm in a frozen response, is a good step forward, but the next step after that is to abandon the language that got you to that revelation and start labeling and naming certain types of charge and energy and feeling in the body-specific locations, and then start working with that location. So the idea of I'm functionally frozen, I'm in a frozen state, that is true, but if you really break down what fear and freeze means for you, you'll find that it probably localizes in 1 to 3 areas of the body, and then you can trace that back in a somatic way. For example, if the functional freeze manifests for you as I feel tight in my throat, I feel stuck in my lungs, I feel emptied somewhere like in my upper stomach, my diaphragm, I feel emptied out. For you to trace back those sensations in a personal somatic response and ask, why do I feel this here? Where did that come from? What does this remind me of? Oh, the feeling of being emptied out reminds me of what happened at this period of my life. Oh, the feeling of this kind of thing, it reminds me of another. You're so much you're so much more personalized in your personal healing journey. That's why it's about personalizing the theory. So that's my best recommendation. I can't give you exact advice of this is what you should do when you have a functional freeze, because I don't know if we're even talking about the same exact thing when you say functional freeze, or when anyone uses certain technical terminology. It is true, and I'm being pedantic to some degree, but what I'm trying to empower you to do is to find your own body-based solutions, rather than listening to me feeding you words at the mental level, which you'll then step down into bodily checks. Do it the opposite way around. Start from the bodily check, then ascribe some language which is more feeling-based and more sensation-based. Ignore the scientific terminology, and you will find yourself much closer to the central issue, which means that you're much closer to an actual practical solution. It's a bit of a mystery, but it is what works if you actually want to find a solution, rather than me just feeding you words. So I hope that helps in the meantime. Somewhat cryptic, but I'm giving you an honest answer rather than what might sound good as words on YouTube for a YouTube video. This will actually help you to go with that approach. So good luck. Another question coming up, or actually Mike was talking about the book I just held up. Thank you, Mike, for coming back in the chat. Neurosis and Human Growth, for anyone joining live, by Karen Horney. Mike started reading this one 2 weeks ago on my recommendation on Livestream, and said that the book is, quote, Neurosis and Human Growth covers the concept of a real self versus idealized self, and the gap between the idealized self and reality is the source of neurotic suffering. Very, very good. I mean, the core concept of the false self, Mike, and even the idea of neurosis, actually, the word neurosis has fallen out of favor. It feels like a dated term. To say that I've got a neurotic tendency feels like it's almost a slur. Oh, he's neurotic, she's being neurotic. But neurosis itself is one of those paradoxically very useful clinical terms that helps to bring clarity and stability to a series of quite mixed emotional associations, and even Jungian complexes can fall within the realm of like neurotic disorders. If you can identify amidst that storm of feelings and sensations and associations something like a real self, and you can cling on to that like a strong rock in a storm, and then you can assess the various neurotic conditions around you, that is something that everyone should do, and Karen Horney is a particularly good guide to get you through those stormy waters. So I do recommend it. Absolutely recommend it. Mike, keep going with the book as well. And after you've read Neurosis and Human Growth, what I would recommend you read, if you haven't already, is probably Karen Horney's second book here, Self-Analysis, which will take it to the next level. Fun fact behind the scenes, Karen Horney pioneered the idea of self-analysis. I believe this book was published in the 1920s. This one was in 1918 to 1932. So yeah, very, very beginning of 1930s is when these ideas started to come through. If you're into self-development, which you obviously are because you're watching this live stream, this is where it came from. All the way back, almost 100 years ago, original self-development theory, the idea that you don't need to work with just a therapist. You don't need to go on the Freudian couch every single day, 5 days a week. You don't need to do it. You can self-analyze and become your own therapist because you are the one who spends the most time with yourself. Karen Horney pioneered that tradition. I'm going to do this. There we go. And I'm going to move the squeaky chair. Definitely needs replacing. There we go. Some good questions coming through. CC says, what about Rogers and his idea that the relationship heals? Fantastic. The therapeutic relationship is important, but you are arguably in the most important relationship of your life if you think of your relationship to yourself. The same principle applies, right? You understand what I'm saying there, CC? To develop a therapeutic relationship where you develop an inner therapist who is delivering compassion and care and arguably a higher self or soul contact, and you feel like you've got a difference between you as the person, me as Jordan Thornton, and my soul as something which is both Jordan Thornton and far beyond Jordan Thornton, that relationship itself is something that Carl Rogers would surely be a fan of and be supportive with. He was quite a humanistic thinker. He definitely had more transpersonal bent inside of him. So although formal therapy does have that therapeutic relationship, I would argue, based on experience, you can develop that inside yourself to a significant degree. It's not the same as a professional, it's not the same as a formal counselling agreement, but you are going to be with yourself for many, many decades. And it's a 24-hour relationship, so worth strengthening at the very least. I see you saying Roberto Assagioli all the way. Absolutely, I agree. We've got about 44 people joining live. Say hello in the chat if you just joined. We're doing a shadow work live stream. As you can probably tell from the title, nice and simple title today. I wanted to see if I needed to get creative or not on the title, or if I could just call it Shadow Work Live Stream, and it seems that we get the same number of people showing up anyway. Rini says hello in the chat. Fantastic. I'm currently having a mushroom tea. I think it's a mix of chaga, lion's mane, cordyceps and reishi. It might not be cordyceps. Might just be reishi, chaga, and lion's mane to help my brain reactivate between Shadow Work Library seminars, which begin at midnight. Looking now at the chat for another question. Abby, great question. Actually, no, Anemic, you asked a very quick question. You said, Anemic6999, you seem not to have made a video on regular narcissism. Is there a reason? Yes, there is. Why don't I make videos on narcissism? It's because when you start making videos on narcissism, unfortunately the algorithm puts you into a certain category of similar channels that make similar videos on narcissism, and very, very, very unfortunately, you tend to attract a certain type of audience member who is very much in the realm of recovering from narcissistic parents, narcissistic relationships, and that's good. That's very good work. But I know that I don't specialize in that work in the sense of it going to be a frequent topic on YouTube, and unfortunately many people who are wrapped up in that very deeply important emotional processing are quite one-track minded. Someone who's recovering, quite rightfully so, from an abusive narcissistic relationship isn't then going to be interested in my self-actualization work, necessarily. You might say, well, of course I would be, because you're the one showing up on a live stream, anyone in the chat, you are interested in wider ideas, but the general issue with certain very high-charged topics or very absorptive topics is that you will attract audiences that only really resonate with that major theme, and then they won't be interested in the rest of the work. And because I am more holistically focused in a working individual, I will happily work with narcissistic themes with private clients. Inside the Shadow Work Library, my active seminars, every single week we've discussed narcissism. We mention it from time to time, but I won't be making videos on it because you need to, unfortunately, when you're playing the YouTube game, you need to be aware of how the algorithm works and basically not choosing topics that would bring in certain very motivated but very linearly thinking individuals. And when you've read enough psychology, you understand that certain issues do create certain, let's call it just blinding effects. It's not that it's bad, I'm not judging these people. In the same way that if I were to make a video on, it happens when I make videos on red flags in relationships. If I make a red flag video and it goes well, you then attract an audience who are really interested in like how to spot red flags in relationships, and they're not going to relate to my videos on Ken Wilber or Abraham Maslow. It just doesn't translate. And someone else said in the chat, there's already enough narcissism content. Yeah, it's not my particular topic of interest as well. So you need to have a real passion to be able to talk about things every single week on and off. And I like people like Karen Horney in the original kind of verge of humanistic thinking rather than more, relational abuse kind of stuff. Savamar says, what do I think about behaviorism? It's interesting, but not my focus. Behaviorism is a necessary foundation in psychology. There are aspects of behaviorism which are very practical. I'm personally tilted towards the humanistic and the transpersonal and the Jungian and also the somatic. So it's just not my thing that I would go into too much. And I see you retracted the message. No need to take it away. Behaviorism isn't that bad. No need to delete your message, my friend. Behaviorism, wonderful foundation, just not my speciality as well. Just like the narcissistic topic. Going back now into the chat, my friends. Wonderful stream so far. Let's try and find something I can go deep on. Let's switch on fully and engage in a topic of choice. I think we had a question from Abby. Yes, Abby. Abby asked, how do you personally apply all the psychology knowledge you read so that it doesn't just stay as information but actually changes your daily life? Several points to mention on this. Abby says, how do I personally apply all the psychology knowledge you read? Don't do that. That's a silly idea. It's a stupid idea. You don't aim for applying it all. I've said this many, many times. I will die on this hill. When I read a book, I am lucky to get 10% out of the book. But if that's a 300-page book, I've just had 30 pages of information downloaded into me. When I then wait 3 to 6 months and then reread the book and go back through my highlights and then retype the notes, I might be lucky to get 20%. I'm now at 60 pages of absorption. During that time, I will have worked through those first 30 pages and day-to-day issues. Maybe I found something relating to my relationship, or something relating to God, or something relating to my business, or something relating to a trauma that I experienced when I was younger. I'm looking at all these different psychology questions and all these different books. I'm taking 10% from each book, and I'm letting it simmer over that 3 to 6 month period, and then I will pick the book up back again and do the second read, and I might be lucky to get double, having had some experience. My encouragement, Abby, is that when you first read a book, because there is so much information in psychology books in particular, not mainstream ones, but like especially technical ones, you can only ever take so much at once, because you've only ever got so much life to live for the next season ahead. There's only so much you can do in a few months. There's only so many conflicts that you can resolve in a few months. It's why the best books are worth returning to at least twice per year. There are many, many books that I am now reading for a third or fourth time as I'm putting together my self-integration school curriculum. If you haven't been following me over on Instagram, I'm on a daily challenge of sharing my daily workouts. I'm currently doing 2 workouts per day and filming 2 videos per day, roughly speaking, for the self-integration school, or doing a live stream. Today I'm doing a live stream. Yesterday I decided to film 4 videos. I'm doing a bit of a challenge this week where I'm doing day on, day off, so 0, 4, 0, 4, 0, 4, and then the live stream. We still end up with the same numbers by the end of the week, but I'm testing out whether or not the immersive intensity of the film 4 videos in a day and then have a day 0 where I do planning stuff works, and it seems to work more or less. What I'm trying to say there is that these books I'm teaching and really applying in my personal life, I've built relationships with over years. It is so cool for me to be filming the self-integration school, and this week I'm filming the inner child module. And some of the books I've read for the inner child module, when I go back to my laptop and I open up the Google Doc and I see my typed notes, sometimes there's 20-page documents that I typed up from these books. I can see when I dated it, and some of these books are from 2020, 2021, and to reread my old notes from 4 or 5 years ago, I've become a new man, and I relate to the information in a different way. I've become a different person in regards to my problems, my conflicts. I have different levels of compassion and understanding, and then the book starts to become more. So you asked me this question, Abby, of how do I personally apply everything I get from psychology books. Firstly, I only try and get 10% on the first read. I then try and get 20% on the second read, and then I really apply the principle of patient repetition. The most brilliant books deserve to be reread, in the same way that you might have favourite films or favourite albums that you listen to, and they evolve as you evolve. That's what good psychology books can be, and I hope that helps. Should relieve the tension of feeling like when you're reading a book that's super high value, that you need to get everything out of it immediately. Don't worry, it's not a fickle boyfriend or girlfriend. They're not going to leave you if you don't give them enough attention immediately. They can stay on the shelf for decades, and they will patiently be waiting for you. Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow and Ken Wilber and Carl Jung, they're all going to be over on these shelves, and whether or not I pick them up and stroke them once per week or leave them there for 2 years gathering dust, when I break open that spine, they're going to be just as enthusiastic and maybe let out a little yelp of enjoyment. That got pretty unnecessarily erotic, but nonetheless, I'm pretty sure there's some bibliophiles in here, so enjoy the metaphor, and hopefully that helps. I see Brian in the chat. Stroke that Wilbur. Yeah, Brian, I know that you've been enjoying stroking Wilbur recently as well. You're big on the Ken Wilbur. It's good to see you here. Out of context, that seems ridiculous, but yeah, Brian and I have spoken before. So, got another question in the chat. Let's see what we got. I see Happy Sunday from Altoidel. Happy Sunday. Okay, Elaine, this is a great question. If I remember correctly, you mentioned you struggled with dissociation from your body. What was the very first bridge that I built back to it? How did I get back into my body when I was a dissociated child and teenager? Let's go for story time. So story time, for people who don't know, my personal trauma history from a somatic perspective. In a nutshell, whether it was a traumatic birth due to an emergency cesarean after 22, 23, 24 hours of surgery that failed to progress, my head got stuck inside of my mother, and I got compressed here, and then I was panicking and apparently about to die inside the womb. I then had an emergency cesarean because I was stuck here, and I couldn't see. I don't know whether it happened in the womb or whether it happened as having soft tissue around my eyes. It's a mystery that doesn't arguably matter, but the point is I did not get glasses until I was age 11, and by the time I first got glasses I was already a -3.5 prescription. For anyone who wears glasses, you know what that means immediately. For people who don't wear glasses, it means that throughout all of my developmental years I couldn't see further than my arms reach. You have to be very careful with that gesture these days. I couldn't see further than my arms reach, you know what I'm saying? That's fun. Anyway, I couldn't see further than my arms reach. This caused major dissociative issues, as you might imagine. Imagine trying to form bonds with family and friends and even the environment that you exist in when you can't see further than half a meter. By the time that I got glasses, I could probably just about read a book without glasses at arms like this kind of distance. I could probably read it from about here. But that creates a highly dissociative child. I then got glasses and contact lenses, and I lived inside the dissociative teenage body for years after that. Things only really started to turn around when I first started embracing health and fitness, but I'd argue that the deeper psychological work only really began from 3 major lanes. We've got the somatic embodiment perspective, we've got the sobriety perspective, which is about changing my nervous system in terms of what I consume and what I don't consume, and then arguably the spiritual perspective. So these are 3 bridges that I built from my dissociative history maybe about a decade ago. Slightly less than a decade ago, these were becoming big issues for me. Firstly, from an embodiment perspective, training physically and putting on size was very useful for me. To physically be in my body, and currently I work out twice per day, I go for a weighted walk every way, and I maintain the anchor of being in my flesh. That is a bridge that I've not only built, but actively maintain and reinforce on literally a day-by-day basis. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you're up in the spirit or up in the mind, you need to come back into the flesh. Number 1 recommendation. The second thing I'd recommend is I strongly advise that you get sober. If you're dissociative, you are generally more vulnerable to things like alcoholic states or addictive states with drugs because you're already used to having somewhat weak boundaries between your mental ego and your physical ego. Your mental ego is kind of disconnected, your sense of identity is floating regardless, so when you start changing the biochemistry in your body with substances, that distance doesn't even need to be challenged or broken or tested too much. There's already a very thin tether. So you create disturbance and disorder in the body and in the chemical system of the body, and then the mental ego, which is already a bit disturbed and a bit loose and a bit like a floaty balloon in the wind. Those two together create a very unstable state that most people who are dissociative, either from childhood or an adult dissociation, even just being hooked on the screens, if you spend too much time looking into one of these, you are, believe it or not, more vulnerable to things like the effects of alcohol, because you're not living in your body. Because if you are living in your body and you're frequently harming yourself with substances, you're not properly in contact with how that feels. You can't be, I will say it this way, you can't be properly embodied and truly healthy in the sense of a mind-body integration and want to binge drink or consume dangerous drugs. It does not happen. You might reasonably have healthy moderation. For example, let's imagine you're a healthy 40-year-old. You've got mind-body integration. You can enjoy going to a friend's party, going to a social reunion, and having a few drinks and getting a little bit drunk and tipsy. But you get that moment very strongly inside yourself of, this is where I stop. This no longer feels good in my body. I feel like I'm not becoming myself. I'm no longer who I normally am. And you naturally come back in. The same with drugs, generally speaking, as people get more and more in touch with the health of their body, they see it as a temple-like experience, whereas before in the dissociative experience, it's a place that you want to abandon. Like it's a broken, ruined home, and you don't want to spend any time there. When it becomes a temple, you want to inhabit the place. You want to look after the place, and that's looking after you. This shift does happen over years for me personally. Now being 6 years sober, I can't imagine going back. It would be, I was out in my gym earlier. When I woke up, I went and did a small workout before the Shadow Work Library seminar, and one of my neighbours was smoking a cigarette, and they are quite a distance away. I mean, realistically, this person was probably 30, 40 meters away, so all the way over on the other side of the street, back in their place, and I was so sensitive to the smells coming in, not in like, oh, I'm panicking, and I became a trembling mess of, oh no, my neighbour's smoking, and what can I do? But I'm aware of the fumes and I was pedaling on the exercise bike, and as I'm increasing my oxygenation, I'm breathing deeper, and I'm taking in more smoke. I was like, oh, this is, I can feel it interacting with me, and it was frustrating. Eventually, you know, I came back inside, but you become so sensitive to things like this, not in a way that it's going to crush you, and you need to be a special snowflake who completely protects yourself from everything in the environment, but also you do become a bit of a special snowflake. I'm very, very sensitive to chemicals. I have these various organic essential oils right next to me. These are not sponsored, but I like having essential oils. I've got a nice peppermint one and a cedarwood one. Maybe it comes up just like that. Yeah, some nice organic essential oils. And I like loading these up almost every single day, and there's about 20 of them here. I make concoctions and I fill the air with nice, purifying, healthy aromas, and that really benefits me. I feed off of the healthy senses of both the mind and the body, what it means, the story, all kinds of things going on, and I actively feel repulsed by that which is bad for me. I will summarize it as saying, the second major way of healing from dissociation, for me personally, is developing a real sanctified process of what does and doesn't enter my body. And if you already have a history of your body being a place that you don't want to inhabit, it is all the more important for you to sanctify the fuck out of your body and not let pollutants in. If it used to feel like a biohazard site, don't keep pouring toxic sludge. Jordan, how do I heal from dissociation? I had a really traumatic experience when I was 19 years old. Well, I know you're drinking to cope with the pain, but consider what it'd be like and how much easier it would be to be able to come back into your body if your body wasn't a constant sludge factory. Really makes a difference. The third and final point that I'll mention on this question of how to build a bridge from dissociative childhood history or a particularly dissociative traumatic incident into an embodied history, an embodied reality, I should say. So you've got the initial somatics, you've got the sobriety angle of cleaning up your substances, but the third major thing is spiritual reconciliation. This could be any form of higher power. For most of the people who are watching this live stream, you're going to be comfortable enough with the idea of God, or at the very least the idea of a soul or the universe. If you want to go more new age about things, I'll use the word God. For you to develop a working relationship with God, and by extension your own soul as an intermediary between your ego and God. So you have your ego, and then you have your soul, and then you have God. To develop a three-way conversation and really explore the space between what feels like broken parts of you, or places that you don't want to inhabit, and places that you start inhabiting on a spiritual level. You start inhabiting your soul. You start identifying more and more as the soul that you are, or you start identifying as part of a reciprocal relationship with God and a higher power. Guess what happens? You become less afraid. When you have spiritual strength, no matter what you have faced, no matter what you have survived, whether it is the most horrific abuses from childhood every single year for 20 years, or a really terrible moment in your 20s or 30s, if you can develop spiritual resolve, this is the kind of spiritual strength that allows people to somehow inhabit places that feel like they are polluted and poisoned, and yet they find a way to purify while they are sat within that poison. You become the purifying light against the darkness of your own past. And that is a spiritual strength, that is a sense of willpower and autonomy and agency at the spiritual level. It is a relationship reinforced and infused in the grace of God. And for you to get to a place where you are truly in contact with at least a small portion of what you actually are, beyond this more samsaric nature of here we are as a temporary incarnation, it is very powerful. I don't go all the way into Eastern beliefs on this. It is very true that you should also be a fleshy human being, which is why I emphasize somatics as the first point. It's very true, you should also look after your biochemistry with substances, but most people who are dissociative, you also have a gift. And that gift of being dissociative is that you're already loosely tethered to the reality that most people would call everyday reality, and you're in a different reality. Consensus reality, let's call it that, that doesn't matter so much for you. You're in a different realm, you're in a different dimension. This is a great burden, and it's also a great blessing. You'll be particularly gifted with being able to go much further than most people in meditation. You'll be particularly gifted with being able to open up to visionary experiences and active imaginations. This is a power that can be used for harm, and it can be used for great gain. So, Abby, hopefully that answers your question about whether or not you can build the bridges, and how I personally went about the bridges. Those are the three things I recommend for anyone with a dissociative history. And I will say quite quite happily and quite confidently that if you maintain these three basic pillars on that bridge of re-embodiment, you just do become quite centered and integrated as an individual. It really does work. It is so worth it. I can speak quite passionately and quite fluently on this topic because this has been my lived experience for the entirety of my life. This has been the major thing that I've personally healed from dissociative and depressive tendencies starting from the age of 10, but then before then, not being able to see the world around me. Imagine what that's like. Imagine only being able to see a blurry flame in front of you. Imagine not being able to see your mother and father's face. Imagine not being able to know when you're out at the playground if you were walking towards a group of friends or a group of strangers. Happened to me many times. I developed something called the swerve. Little 7-year-old Jordan. It's playtime. Going up to my friend, going to play some football. They're not my friends. Didn't matter. I was going this way instead. Oh, where's my friends over there? Oh, there. Right? Scary. Eventually, you either have two options. You get scared by it and you become withdrawn, or you somehow still stay in the world, but you withdraw anyway. Vision is important, but it's not just physical vision. What I'm trying to emphasize in this final point is vision towards the other realms, vision towards a deeper power and a deeper source of sovereignty that you have access to. That is the central pillar behind a lot of what I've done on this channel. You are so much more than your trauma, but you're also a lot more than your human ambitions and human intentions. You have a more sovereign, more spiritual aspect of you, which is very much possible to build a relationship with. And this goes back to the principle of self-analysis. What is the self in Jungian terminology? Again, it is an approximation for the soul. Not technically speaking, many Jungians would disagree with me, but most people, colloquially speaking, when they are in contact with the self, they feel like they're in contact with the soul. And who am I to disagree with them? At the very least, they feel like they've seated themselves in a higher authority within. And that's pretty cool. It's well worth doing. Fantastic question. I think we should be able to take at least 2 more questions before going to the hour mark on the live stream. Let's see what we've got. Again, if you want your question answered, please do repost it if I didn't get into it, and we will go as far as we can. Magd Khaled said, how to not fall into the trap of reading a book after another book as a crutch to get better, and it becomes your ego who drives this need for knowledge. Magd, I wouldn't worry about it. Most people who are watching this channel aren't reading enough books. I read 4 to 6 hours per day on average for 5.5 years straight. I was fine. I made it my job. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying about how do I stop this endless cycle of always reading books and I'm always reading books. But the reality is, my friend, I have very rarely met someone who is reading too many books because they're not actually reading as much as they think they are. They're kind of in the state of being absorptive. So maybe they're watching a lot of YouTube videos and listening to podcasts and they're always in the self-development loop. But the actual reading of high-quality books, you eventually satiate yourself. I'm going to give you an analogy to hopefully ease your fears. If you are a starving man and you haven't eaten in 3 days and you find yourself at the local McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, fast food outlet, you will find that you will need to eat a tremendous amount of food to feel satiated because it's not real fucking food. It looks like food, it tastes like it might be food, but it's not real nutrition. If you find yourself at the farmer's market and there are organic vegetables on sale and you're eating high quality, very oxygenating, very hydrating, very soul-inducing food because it's alive. It's physically alive still. That cucumber is so fucking alive, it's vibrating, quite literally, as opposed to the dead McDonald's cheeseburger. You will need to eat less of the organic vegetables compared to the fast food bullshit. Information is the same. If you are truly reading too many books, you are probably not reading the right books. You're probably not reading deep enough books. If you were to read a very, very complex book that's very deep, for example, I will show you this book, which is What the Candle is Standing On. This one you'll have to flip around on your screen. This is Experiencing by Alvin Mara, a humanistic theory of psychology and psychiatry. This book took Alvin Mara at least a decade to write, to my understanding. It's a 1960s, 1970s book from humanistic psychological perspective. This is the guy Actually, we've got the publishing date, 1978. So Alvin Mara, who is he? You probably don't know. That's fine. I didn't know either. He is the guy that other people reference. He's like the source note in other humanistic guides. He was doing like the real deep research behind the scenes. I've got this lovely old 1970s copy. It's a beautiful 550 page hardback. You can't read too many of books like this because it's like the organic meal for the mind. You literally reach the point of satiation and you naturally take a break when you need to take a break. Whereas if you're reading more trendy, more pop psychology books, because they don't have actual substance to them and they're often recycled content which feels pithy and feels good, it is the equivalent of informational junk food. That is the majority of books published today, which is why the majority of books in my library are pre-1990, which is pre-internet, which is a whole different atmosphere around the intellectual climate, especially in regards to psychology, before things become overly insured and also the business market changes. But that's another point. My recommendation for you, and I say this with love and compassion, don't worry about consuming too many books. I would just focus on what kind of quality of material am I consuming. It's not just a casual word to consume something. Are you eating the organic meal equivalent of psychological guidance, or are you having the Burger King special $2 menu? I don't know. I haven't eaten McDonald's in a decade. When I was traveling, I think I had a McDonald's for about a decade. Maybe slightly less than a decade since I've eaten from a McDonald's. It's obviously poison. It's not good for you. Just treat your information the same way. And sometimes your favorite YouTubers and favorite creators, even if they have great intentions, they are not aware that they are recycling things and they are not producing real sustenance for you to devour. But you naturally reach a point of satiation and you don't get that kind of endless hungry ghost feeling when you are consuming very good material, unless you turn it into your job and you become me and you become a professional researcher. But at a certain point I stopped reading for myself and I start reading to help my students and my clients, and that happened 4 years ago, roughly speaking. So take that as you will, my friend. Amanda's in the chat saying hi, Jordan. Hello, Amanda. Saying hi to you before we go to the next question. Amanda's now deleted her message. Amanda, goodbye. There's 2 people retracting their messages today. We had a question about, are women Delulu? Oh, controversial. From Ruby Goofy. Is that a real name? Ruby Goofy. Are women Delulu when it comes to their romantic expectations or standards? What's realistic and what's not? You know what? Men and women are both Delulu. That's my conclusion. In the whole world of modern dating and what you're finding on the internet, men and women are both delusional about what is and isn't realistically possible for them to find in a partner, because they don't have a healthy enough expectation of how long things take to mature. Not only how long a relationship takes to mature, how long it takes to move through the courtship process itself, how long it takes to go from first meeting someone to potentially forming a committed relationship, to potentially moving in together, to potentially disclosing very personal information about yourself that you need to establish trust for, to sharing a sexual connection. People are exceptionally impatient. And I would say that men and women, on the whole, societally speaking, are far more entitled than we were about 20 years ago because of the effects of the internet. 20 years ago, a 35-year-old man or 35-year-old woman did not have as many points of comparison on social media for what relationship goals actually were. They had their local community, they maybe had some stories they found in magazines, and then they had celebrity culture as a whole. But everyone knew back then that even celebrity culture as a whole, imagine it's 2005, right? It's 2005, you're seeing a magazine or you're seeing some kind of highlight reel on MTV and it's some celebrity drama gossip. You know it's the world of celebrity. But what's happened now is that the world of celebrity has become the world of micro-celebrity on social media, and these unrealistic relationship standards of what is a curated content reel of if he wanted to, then he would kind of thinking. It's so manufactured. You can see this most at action if you find social media pages, especially on Instagram or TikTok, where it's a couples page or it's someone who has a business where they make money from being some kind of relationship expert or having a certain type of aspirational lifestyle. I can guarantee that the content is curated in such a way to create that aesthetic impact, which in some way connects back to what was happening in 2005 with the paparazzi effect around celebrities. The problem is that because most of us are on social media every single day, and people who are single and lonely and maybe a little bit sad and maybe a little bit angry because they're not with the kind of partner they want, they're seeing all of these supposedly realistic standards of what they could expect, whereas the reality is they haven't taken a look down at their own slobby body, their own slobby habits, their own lack of values and moral qualities. They haven't taken a vision towards their spiritual holes. They haven't really done a deep self-assessment of who they actually are. They are caught up in the projections, unfortunately, of what they deserve to have. And it's based on a carbon copy, cut and paste, algorithmically optimized content machine of what looks good and what sells. And that is a real state of self-abandonment and a lacking self-awareness. And then you have to imagine. Let's imagine Billy Bob over here and Sarah Jane over here. Billy Bob is in his 30s, both 35-year-olds, right? Two age-appropriate matches. Billy Bob's single, and he's kind of let himself go a little bit. And he's seen on the phone, he's like, this is how my woman should treat me. And then Sarah Jane's over here and she's seeing something that's like, this engagement proposal, like, how it is with the kids. This is how my man should treat me. And then they both swipe on their app, and guess what? They've got a dating app of choice, and bing, it's a match. And then they message each other. They're both in the mental state of projecting out their fantasy expectations for what Billy Bob could be or Sarah Jane could be. And they're both excited by this. They're both setting their expectations because they both want the fantasy to be true. They've literally just a minute ago seen 2 comparative reels of the dream woman and the dream man. And now they're setting up a date. A few days later, they meet up at a coffee shop before going for a walk in the park. And guess what? They are crushingly disappointed by the not so attractive, not so put together, not so articulate, not so intelligent, not so aspirational individual who's confronting them. Because guess what? They both wasted their fucking lives scrolling on the screen and did nothing with their lives for the last 10 years. That is the majority of people in society, and I say that with love, and it's fucking tragic. We are living through the screens, and there's a collective golden shadow projection onto the romantic other. There's a book over here in the library by John Sanford called The Invisible Partners. There's another book by James Hollis called The Eden Project, In Search of the Magical Other. For the last 5 to 10 years, especially since the pandemic in 2020, people have given themselves something of an emotional romantic pacifier by consuming images of what a possible dream relationship could be at detriment to becoming the kind of man or woman who deserves that dream relationship. This is not because you are not worthy of intrinsic love. It is not because you are not worthy of the default respect that being a human being deserves. But to have a certain type of relationship, you need to be a certain type of person who's a compatible match for the other. I see Queen in the chat saying we can't expect a mature relationship if we aren't mature individuals first. Exactly. And one of the major steps to maturity is not going into dating situations with a series of golden shadow overlays and wishful fantasies and expectations about what your Mr. Right or Mrs. Right is going to bring you, at detriment to you not realizing just how little effort you've put into your own life. Some people will say, Jordan, that's ridiculous. I'm a high value man or I'm a high value woman, and I'm doing all the things right, but I just can't seem to find a man. I just can't seem to find a woman. You might be doing many things right, but there will always be a reason why. And those reasons are within your control. Might be an attitude issue. Might be something around a previous trauma that you haven't resolved that creates relational conflict. It might be a certain pattern of avoidance or possessiveness. I don't know. I'm not getting at you. I'm just saying that if you do truly want to get properly met in a romantic relationship, the first stage is unplugging yourself from the constant social media, screen-sucking, golden shadow fantasy projection, and start being your own source of self-inspiration, and dare I say it, romanticizing your own life before you try and build a romantic partnership with someone else. You need to genuinely, and this isn't just cliche advice, you need to genuinely be in love with your own life. Because otherwise you will be, by necessity, taking all of that love and romance and pouring it onto the other person and hoping that they will somehow give you a double dose back. Pass it on and give it back to the same person. That kind of ideology rarely works. I see in the chat that's fair for everybody, I agree. And M6, E5, which sounds like a battleship move. You sunk my battleship. Says totally agree with the comments on social media. That was nice. Nice little rant there. Quite passionate. I do have hope for people. It's just a case that you get what you are, more or less. There tends to be a universal principle at play, and it's sad that quite often maybe people are delulu in a way where they've lived a bit too much through the screen and digital persona and parasocial identification with a certain type of ideology or fantasy life on the internet that they see. Whether it's a certain, like, I want this city relationship, this nice urban relationship where we go to all the cool bars and clubs, or I want this like really homey country relationship where we homeschool our children and we eat organic chicken eggs from our farm every day. People are living in fantasy states, and this has compounded year on year since the pandemic, when people got locked into their own fantasy environments and got disconnected from the world. And because of AI in the last 2 years then also facilitating people not needing to form so many relationships, it is only getting worse and worse. And one of the crescendo moments will be around 5 to 10 years from now, when VR and immersive technologies blend with AI in a certain way. People will really choose to live in Sims-like, Second Life nature, kind of virtual online role-playing spaces where they've got their fantasy boyfriend, fantasy girlfriend. You can already see apps where you've got these robot girlfriends who are talking to you, and it's deeply sad. And yet people will seemingly somehow be contented, or at least they'll be minimally disgruntled to plug into these states, because it is just a continuation of their own fantasy state. This is the digital dilemma that we find ourselves in. It will get more and more difficult for people to form relationships. I am worried what will happen for Generation Alpha. The kids who are probably like, what, age 10 or something right now? What are they going to be like when they're 30? Very, very difficult. Let's take a few more questions. And I've got 33 minutes until my Shadow Work Library seminar, so I think I can do about one more question. I'll see which one comes up. Anyone who's watching live, if you have an urgent question, please do repost your question, and I will potentially choose the next one that comes up. I apologise if I didn't get to your question. Try and give a good range between depth and accessibility on these. Puneet, you asked a question about depression, which is very similar to what I just answered about dissociation and the freeze response, so I'm not going to answer your question in this live stream, but I feel like I did speak around your issues if you were here earlier on, but please do watch the replay if you didn't see that. Some good advice in there. I'm going to wait for one more question. Good mushroom tea. That lion's mane. Tasty, tasty brain food. Can't get too much lion's mane. Gives you a bit of energy. Real good, real good. We've got multiple questions coming in, all at once, more or less. Let's choose my favourite selfishly. What do I want to talk about? If I don't choose your question, it's not that you're a bad person. I just have my own preferences. Wow, loads of questions. Fantastic. Okay, there's two questions that are basically the same, so I'll go with this. Natty asks, how do I stop comparing myself to others? And Ralph asks, what are the steps to get over the need to compete and compare oneself against others and accept oneself in the spot where one is? Looks like we're going to talk about how to stop comparing to others. I have really never struggled from this personally, I will be honest with you. I've always been extremely self-assured and quite defiant as a child too. Just because other people are doing it doesn't mean I should do it. Just because other people think something doesn't mean it's true. And I have always been, by temperament, quite problematically defiant. It was an issue with my parents, it was an issue with teachers at school. I'm quite anti-authority to the core, and I also distrust groups. So the mixture of authority figure and group consensus, that's where most social pressure and peer pressure comes from. So I'm not the person to speak to this from lived experience, but maybe I can share with you what it's like to be someone who's generally free of not comparing himself to other people. What does it feel like to be me as a person who doesn't fall into this? And again, this is just my temperament. This is a particular strength that I've been gifted. It's useful in this society, but also actually one of the downsides of this is you can unfortunately take this a bit too far and you become a bit too insensitive or disconnected from social norms and ways that people are meant to behave, and that does cause problems unless you build your own business and fully control your own schedule and have an entirely life of your own design, in which case you get to you get to choose what you do with your day. So I had to build my entire life around my temperament. How to... Oh, how do I answer this question? We've got what? Maximum 10 minutes on this. Give me a moment. I'll structure it in my head. What is it like to not compare yourself to other people? What are the benefits? What's it like? I'm trying to structure in my mind in the same way that I'll do in little 5-second windows, like a three bullet points of what it's like to not compare yourself to others. You saw me do this multiple times in the live stream. If it's this, this, and this, the one word that I keep coming back to is inconsequential. And by inconsequential, I mean it doesn't fucking matter. Doesn't fucking matter. I feel that to my bones when it comes to judgments and prejudices of other people. This has only become stronger when you become a public figure and you get things like hate comments on a week-by-week basis and all kinds of projections coming your way. It doesn't fucking matter. Of course, you shouldn't be so out of touch, but I want you to get the feeling of knowing what does and what doesn't matter. If you are caught in comparing yourself to others, it is very, very likely from a developmental psychology perspective that you had a mother or a father or both at the same time that were very critical and very judgmental. You learned to self-police yourself in a way that would minimize conflict and minimize potential mistakes or accidents that your parents would punish you for by being excessively self-analytical in an anxious and nervous way. For you to dethrone your parents from this inner authority figure that's still probably working as some kind of internalized voice, some kind of self-shaming voice, some kind of inner critic within, you will then get the liberation from not how to stop comparing yourself to other people, but actually take away the major pillar, which is how do you stop living up or trying to live up to your parents' ever-shifting expectations of you. If you can be free of parental expectations as an adult, you are basically free of societal expectations from other adults because you have tackled the major dragon, as it were. If you slay the dragon, it's easy to kick down a goblin, to bring in a bit of fantasy imagery, but that is very much how it feels. I mean, if the dragon of parental criticism is then met with the serpent of social pressure peer group, and it's like scaling down, you have the massive dragon, it's 20 feet tall, you then have like a 6-foot anaconda that you have to slice up, and then you have the internet gremlins and goblins who are in your comment section. It really is orders of magnitude of inconsequentiality of what so-and-so thinks and what so-and-so thinks or what so-and-so is doing. It just doesn't matter. So practical trauma psychology perspective, how to stop comparing yourself to other people, dethrone the inner critic which has become internalized from a particularly judgmental parental figure. If you are then at that point, what I advise you to go into is something like a wider spiritual philosophy on mortality and death. The sheer inconsequentiality of your own life gives you a very, very, very strong claim towards liberation and towards a sense of levity and ultimately going through life with your hands somewhat holding things but not holding them too tightly. You can move through life with a sense of ease and self-compassion and understanding for your mistakes if you are really connected with the mortality of it all. On a day-by-day basis, with very, very few exceptions, I will think about my own death, not in a formal stoic, I'm a stoic bro and I'm making a death practice. I just do. I have a real sense of time, of how limited my time is, and sometimes when I'm in bad emotional states, only a couple times per year, that will scare me, that will be worrying, but most of the time, 19 days out of 20 in a row, my understanding of death creates a sense of liberation that no matter what I did or didn't do today, it doesn't fucking matter. Not only do they not matter, not only does the dragon not matter, but I don't matter. Behind the worry of comparing yourself to others is something of an unconscious or hidden narcissism of thinking that you're the center of the universe. But you're not. You're just another man, just another woman. It does not matter what you do. Other side of this, it deeply matters. There are moral consequences. I want you to be self-actualizing. But on this particular issue of I'm always worried about what other people think, you have something of these patterns ultimately at play. Either an internalized parental figure that you're mentally shadowboxing and defending yourself from because of how they were when you were 10 years old. I need to police myself. No, I'm not doing, what are they going to think? You know, they're waiting for them to come home from work, and it's like, what does mom or dad think? Like, you're scared. If it's not that, you might have a very hidden, grandiose plug right up your rear end, and you are full of your own anxiety, full of your own fear. You've just plugged yourself up. Like, imagine that, like, right up there. You are fully stuffed with your own self-absorption. It's so far up there that it's quite uncomfortable. 20 inches worth. Maybe this candle still on fire. No wonder you're so absorbed in your own pain. You're full of it. You're full of your own self-obsession. It's a narcissistic myth to the core. That is usually behind the scenes for people who compare themselves too much to others. You think too highly of yourself in an unhealthy way. You are so full of yourself, but you are pretending, unconsciously perhaps, and this isn't me getting at you, that it's because you're concerned about others, whereas actually you're just potentially trying to find an excuse for ways to think more about yourself. But if you embrace death and the inconsequentiality of all things, you do get a liberation from both perspectives. I hope that has helped. Bit of a visual image to end the live stream on, and rather than dragging things out, I will just say, my friend, thank you for being here. I will be back next Sunday for the next live stream. It has been a pleasure. I'll see you then.